possible. So it's hard to listen to somebody for, 45 minutes without there being some kind of back and forth. So I'm going to try to include some breakout room conversations, so small group conversations, and I'm also going to be asking you some questions, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to respond in the chat. But before I kind of get into things, I was hoping for just one thing, and that would be, so I see that everyone is completely anonymous to me. I see some first names and last names. In some cases, I only see like maybe a first name or, perhaps a username. If you wouldn't mind, just for the next, say, 15 seconds, if you can, to turn on your camera and wave to me so that I can put names to faces, that would be excellent.
Hello.
Okay, very good. Hello. It's nice to see you all. That's great. Good. Hello, hello. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for indulging me. Now I know I'm talking to actual humans. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. You should be able to see something that says top 5 tips for thesis and dissertation writing. Do you see that? Yes, if you do, just, you can give me like a thumbs up or a, you can come, excellent, perfect. That's what I need, great, good. Okay, very good. So let's go ahead and get started. It's working. Advancing through, sometimes it takes a minute, there's some latency. There we go. So as I'm, just one more thing. So this is fairly new for me. So I've certainly participated in a lot of Zoom meetings, and I have hosted some, but they've been largely discussion based. So this is really my first time using all of the tools, or as many tools as I can, in this kind of medium. So if you would just kind of be patient with me, and then just let me know if there are things that you can't see on the screen. You could just, you could say something verbally. That probably would be the best way, or you can, write me something in the chat and I will try and catch it. So I think this might be the only slide with my email address on it too, but I'll try and remember. I think I forgot to include that in the last one, but I'll try to remember to kind of point you to it. In addition, this slideshow is being recorded, so you'll have access to it later on. But I am from the Writing Studio, and if you've not been to the Writing Studio before, that's a place where both graduate students and undergraduates can go to get help on their writing and in their presentations. And so we help a lot of graduate students with their master's theses and their dissertations, and job search materials, and conference presentations and articles for publication and that kind of thing. And so I'll draw your attention back to the Writing Studio kind of at the end of this. Okay, so this is our agenda for the next bit of time. I will be kind of talking about some of the challenges of offering some general writing advice, and why that's hard. And then I'll kind of get into the general tips that I have been able to kind of pull together, ones that I think are useful for both master's and PhD students, and they're all based on research and based on the experience that I've had, and the graduate students who also work at the Writing Studio have also had with students. And then I'll take your questions. I'll point to one other Writing Studio event that's happening this summer, and then I have our kind of website information. Okay, so this is the part where I talk about the challenge of giving general writing advice. So the biggest challenge in giving kind of one size fits all writing advice is that there's no such thing as writing in general, because we're always writing to an audience. We always have a purpose for writing. There are always kind of constraints about or around what we can write and how we can write it. And those kinds of constraints are all based upon things like disciplinary preference. So because ways of knowing and doing differ across disciplines, so ways that evidence is collected, differences in what counts as evidence, differences in how you can convey research and evidence, because those things differ, dissertations and master's theses, the ways that those look also differ. So, so I can't give you a magic formula. I can't say, you know, do X, Y, and Z thing in your introduction and you'll be set. You know, I can't give you a formula. I wish I could. I wish it were that easy. But that's just not the way it works. And to kind of illustrate that, what I was hoping that I could use a poll feature, but I don't see it available here. So what I'm going to ask you to do is really quickly in the chat, and this is for folks who are working on dissertations, because there's a lot more variability with master's theses, but what I would like you to do is just in the chat express, and I'll stop sharing in a second, sharing my screen so I can see what you're saying in the chat, what structure of dissertation is kind of most prevalent in your discipline. When writing a dissertation, are you writing a book-length monograph? Are you writing 3 articles with separate chapters for introductions and conclusions? Are you writing an extended scientific study, which has an introduction and literature review, a methods chapter, results and discussion chapter, and a conclusions and implications chapter? Are you unsure of the structure of the dissertation? Are you writing something else? Or are you not working on a dissertation? Okay, so the 3 choices are, yes, 3, well, there are several choices, but the 3 main choices are book-length monograph, 3 articles, or extended scientific study, and then you can say like, I'm not really sure, or I'm writing something else. So if you guys wouldn't mind doing that in the chat really quickly, and then I'll stop sharing for the moment so that I can see what you write. Okay, oh, you guys are quick. Okay, extended scientific study, 3 articles. 3 articles or a monograph, lots of extended scientific studies, 3 articles, not sure. 3, okay, yeah, all right, so we're at least seeing two different kinds of dissertations. Okay, so you guys can see my screen again, yes? Thumbs up again? Can you see it? No, I'm not seeing any thumbs. It's making me anxious. Yes, good. Okay, very good. Great. Okay. So, again, there's some latency here. All right. So, yeah, I mean, so you guys all mentioned that you are writing either a 3-article dissertation or basically a 4-chapter dissertation, but there are also disciplines that prefer that kind of book length. And so I'm from English, and that's what's expected, a kind of monograph, you know, with a coherent narrative throughout, although not a narrative in the traditional sense, right? We're not writing novels. But it, you know, a dissertation that has a very clear sort of beginning, middle, and end. The same is true of disciplines like history and philosophy. The expectation is that you'll also put together a monograph, a book-length monograph. Other disciplines prefer that kind of 3 articles and bookended by an introduction and a conclusion. And you all stated some. So I think I saw forestry is listed. It's one, but you know, chemistry and political science. So you've got some science and social sciences where 3 articles is preferred. And then the 4 chapters, which is an extended scientific study, you see in psychology, you see in engineering, you see in sociology. So there's lots of variety And that is why. Unfortunately, I can't say do this and you'll be fine. You'll be right as rain. So this leads into my first tip, which is know the structure, know it really well of your dissertation. Even if you think you know exactly what you should be writing, there are ways to get some more sort of, or a more in-depth view of what you need to be doing. And here are some of the ways to understand the structure and understand the expectations. So the reasons, well, actually, I'm going to get into that in the next slide. But the ways to sort of get at the structure questions that lead to what you need to know about the structure are, the things that you need to know are you writing, or is your literature review a single chapter? Is it an integrated literature review? What's the expectations for summary, and what are the expectations for synthesis? Where do those kinds of things appear? You know, how long is the dissertation in your discipline? What kinds of citation styles are you using? Are footnotes required or endnotes required? These are all of the pieces that go into the structure. And then there are other things too, like what counts as evidence, right? So, so in literature or in English studies, we don't do, to a large extent, kind of, we don't do much qualitative or quantitative research. And so evidence for us is the text itself, right? But that's not true, certainly, of lots of other disciplines. Okay, so how do you learn the structure? Well, there are, the way that we suggest most often in the writing studio is to get a hold of samples. So, and how do you get hold of sample dissertations or sample theses? Well, you can ask your peers, right? So there might be people who are currently dissertating or people who are just about to defend. You could certainly ask to see copies of their dissertations so that you can see how those dissertations are structured. You can ask your advisor to share with you share with you examples of past advisees, dissertations, or thesis projects, thesis-length projects. You can also browse the library, thesis and dissertation archives, and I'll make sure that these slides are shared with you. That's a hot link, so you can go ahead and click on it, and it takes you immediately to the library website. So, so those are ways you can get to samples. You can also ask, or you can also search for your advisor's dissertation or master's thesis, and kind of take a look and see, you know, how they wrote and what they wrote. I'll go back and say one of the best ways to sort of see or understand the expectations of your particular advisor is to look at past kind of advisees' dissertations or projects. Okay, so tip number 2, since we're talking about advisors, is to establish a solid relationship with that advisor. And this is important for a number of reasons. One is, and perhaps the biggest, is that there's quite a lot of attrition especially at the PhD level. There are lots of students who don't finish. So this is a national statistic. So between 36 and 51% of all PhD students don't complete their dissertations. And there's that kind of variability because it varies depending upon disciplines. You see more attrition, and actually in the humanities, than you do in the sciences or social sciences. But that's quite a big number. And WVU, I was involved in a research study a couple of years ago, maybe it was 2016 or 2017, and WVU tracked those numbers pretty clearly. So one of the biggest reasons that graduate students don't finish is because they don't have strong advisor-advisee relationships, or they don't necessarily have people to help them as they're kind of working through the dissertating process. So, you know, they don't have necessarily strong mentors or a strong kind of network. And, you know, I guess I will also say that I'm not necessarily naive to sort of think that everybody has this like really happy and productive relationship with the folks who are their advisors. And now might be an especially challenging time because everything's kind of moved online and people are trying to kind of figure out how to work remotely. So, you know, in those instances, there are still things that you can do. There are still things that can kind of happen in your favor, and other places where you can look to find that sort of mentorship or supportive group. So this is something that, this tip number 2, establish or developing those kind of strong relationships. This is something that we talk a lot to students about at the writing studio. So, and you know, this is whether or not you have a really close relationship with your advisor. And these kind of points, nonetheless, are relevant. So, you know, one of the things, or one of the many things that needs to happen is that, you know, you have to establish expectations with your advisor. So you might have the expectation that your advisor will reach out to you with some frequency, but your advisor, her or himself or themselves, might be waiting for you. But because you haven't kind of established how often you'll be in contact before you start the process, then you know, it might be the case that you know, communication is sort of lost between you, or you feel lost because they're waiting for you. So things that need to be established are frequency of contact. You know, how often are you going to be in contact with one another? Preferred method of communication. You know, are you somebody who needs to talk on the phone, or needs to have a Zoom conversation, or even face-to-face? You know, that's certainly possible. These in-person meetings are possible, you know, with some social distancing today. Or is email okay? So again, you know, don't necessarily expect that your advisor is going to know how you want to communicate. So these are things that kind of need to be negotiated between you, that preferred method of communication, whether or not, or how there are timelines for each stage of the dissertation. You know, what's your expectation for when you'll have that first chapter done? And what's their expectation, and how can they best support you so that you meet the deadlines that you're setting for yourself? What type of feedback and how often will you get feedback? These are important things to establish with your advisor. And what kind of monitoring or evaluation or reporting of progress is expected. So, you know, I think that sometimes students worry that because they haven't necessarily established these things kind of up front, that that things are done. So like, say you're listening to me right now and you're in the middle of your dissertation, or you're started and you're thinking to yourself, well, like, gosh, I haven't done any of that. And so tip 2 doesn't necessarily apply, or, you know, it's too late for me. Well, it certainly isn't. You know, at any point you can reach out to your advisor and say like, hey, can we sit down and have a meeting and kind of talk about some of these things? And I would say, like, the vast majority of the time, the advisors kind of appreciate you reaching out and telling them what you need. Okay, and so the third tip is just write. So writing now, actually writing always is it's a lonely process, especially writing a dissertation. It's a challenging process, right? It takes a lot of mental energy. to convey thoughts in ways that are kind of coherent and meaningful to external audiences. And so what we often see at the Writing Center is, or Writing Studio, is that there are students who get caught up in that kind of research phase, right? So they read and they read and they read and they read and they read, and they say to themselves, like, I'm not ready to write yet because I don't know enough. And so the longer you put off the writing, the harder it is. That's truly, the longer you put it off, the harder it is. And so we always tell students to write before they're ready to write, right? So even if you think you're not ready, write anyway, and write often. You know, so there's a book called Writing Your, I think, Dissertation or Thesis or something like that in 15 minutes a day. And that's not terrible advice, right? And so actually what that author says is to commit to writing 15 minutes. And if you write for longer, terrific. In fact, in most cases, people do end up writing for more than 15 minutes. But some days, 15 minutes is all you have the mental energy for. And sometimes, you know, if you are a caretaker, it's all you have time for. But even 15 minutes is, you know, progress towards completion. So tip number 3, write every day. So schedule it in your calendars or your planners, right? So just make a date for yourself. I use a combination of Outlook and Google. And so, you know, commit to writing and consider a date with yourself to write, the same as you might consider a meeting with somebody really important, like a meeting with the dean. You know, so if you had on your calendar, if you scheduled a meeting with the dean, or the dean scheduled a meeting with you, you'd be far less likely to reschedule that meeting, right? Because you know how important it is. So you should treat writing the same way when, you know, you make an appointment with yourself on your calendar. Find a writing buddy or writing buddies. So this was one way that I got through my dissertation. I found some friends, right, who were also dissertating at the same time, and I'd go to their house or they'd come to my house and we'd write together. We weren't writing on similar topics at all, but we just kind of wrote in the same space, and that helped us kind of get the writing done. Use deadlines for motivation. Set deadlines for yourself. Set deadlines with your chair, even if your chair isn't necessarily going to hold you to them, or set deadlines with a kind of writing buddy. So that deadlines tend to be a great motivator. And you can also do things like, especially if you find, you know, sitting down and getting the writing done particularly difficult, using productivity techniques or methods like this Pomodoro method, which I'll show you in a second. And then the last point, which I think actually is the most important, is to not beat yourself up when you're not as productive as you hoped, right? Or if you happen to schedule a meeting with yourself to write and you don't get the writing done. So writing's always hard, but some days it's just much harder than others, and that's okay. So this is that. I'm gonna stop sharing well, I'll talk through this for a second, but this is the Pomodoro technique, and the person who kind of invented this technique, the name, I'm blanking on their names, but it's based on this like tomato timer that they had. That's why they call it the Pomodoro. So after the Pomodoro tomato, the method is as follows. You pick a task, you set a timer for 25 minutes, and then you work for 25 minutes and you don't do anything else. You know, like you don't check email, you don't look at your phone, you're just writing. And then when the time is up, you give yourself a 5-minute break. Then you get back to work for another 20 to 25 minutes. And then you do that, and after 4 times you take a longer break, which is maybe 15 to 30 minutes. And you can do as many Pomodoros as you want. And you know, this the person who kind of created this also suggests that you record your progress. Okay, so this is probably the point at which I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, and you can offer your advice or your some of your writing strategy techniques in the chat. So what are some strategies that you've used in the past or that you're currently using to get the writing done? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah. So what are some of those? What are some things that you guys do? What's worked for you? Yeah, definitely deadlines. I'm with you guys. Anything else besides deadlines? So has anybody tried the Pomodoro technique? Oh, I see a couple. Heather, thanks, Heather. So, not yet, yeah. Okay, so telling your advisor that you have a draft, Heather, that's great. So that's, you know, one of those examples of setting expectations. Yeah, definitely. So Heather, you also said that you find that you're better and more efficient, a more efficient writer at night. So figuring out what time works best for you when you're the most productive, or even when you just have time, you know. So I have a 7-year-old, and so there might be times that I want to write that maybe, so I'm often most productive in the morning, but I don't necessarily have that time because I have to, you know, take care of another person, another human being. But just kind of finding those moments where I have them, for sure. Pomodoro technique, some of you have tried, or something similar. Yeah, that's great. So Megan said, to get myself started and reduce pressure of perfect writing the first time, you always have a document, you open a document called the Scratch document. Yeah, terrific. So you create an environment for yourself where it's low stakes writing, and you tell yourself, it doesn't matter, I don't have to use any of this, but you're just getting your ideas down. That's terrific. Your professor wants you, Rudy, to report progress every 3 days. Wow. They certainly have expectations for you, don't they? Good. And Ganga says, start writing an abstract. Yeah. So an abstract is a really good tool, right? Because what you're doing in an abstract is kind of you're laying out the trajectory of your project. And, you know, the abstract, that document itself, that piece of writing will change over time. And you expect it to, right? Because as you do more research and as you do more writing, you make kind of newer, different discoveries. Let's see. And Taylor said, I start by writing an outline and completing portions in similar pieces by setting deadlines for yourself. Good. So more setting deadlines. And yeah, force yourself to read and write up a summary. Terrific. 1 per day. Yeah, absolutely. And to make these things habits, right? And that's probably one of the trickiest parts, to find something that works for you, that you do and you're like, yeah, that wasn't terrible. And then you do the same thing the next day, and then you do it the next day, and then you do it the next day. And eventually it just becomes a habit, just like other healthy habits that we might have, like working out, or you know, taking good care of ourselves in other ways. Okay, good. So I'm going to share my screen again so we can go back to the slides. Okay. Again, there's that latency. I'm waiting. There we go. Okay, so tip number 4 is to devise a system of organization. And actually a couple of the tips on the next slide don't necessarily speak to organization, but I wasn't quite sure where to fit them, but I'll talk about them in a second. So when you're working on a big project like a thesis or a dissertation, it's really important that you have ways to kind of organize your research, because you are going to be reading a lot. People are going to be sending you things, like your advisors or your mentors or people on your committee. You're going to be sending you articles and directing you places, and then, you know, like you'll go down a research rabbit hole. So so it's really important for you to figure out a way and determine ways to kind of categorize and classify. And so that kind of categorization and classification should be systematized in some way. So you should determine some kind of systematic way to take notes. You know, are you somebody who likes to take notes by hand? Then, you know, designate several notebooks as your kind of dissertation or thesis notebooks. Or, are you somebody who has Word docs, or like who likes to take notes on Word docs? Some people like to take notes on PowerPoint slides, because PowerPoint slides are, they treat them as like electronic versions of note cards, which is like super smart. Some people like note cards. So just create a system for taking notes and organizing your research, and make sure you stick to it, right? So if you're somebody who takes notes on paper like I do, if you switch to taking notes electronically because you think it'll be faster, and you switch back and forth, you can kind of lose sight of what you've read and where things are. Like I've done that before. So we always suggest that, you know, you pick away and you kind of stick with it. Use a citation tracker or devise a system of citation tracking. Record your citations. That's a step that you don't want to wait until the end to do, because you can forget, right? Again, you can forget what you've written, what you've read. And it also just takes a ton of time at the end. You know, there's nothing worse than being done and then having that kind of last step be your works cited page or your bibliography, because that's like not joyful work. It's not, because there can be a lot about writing a dissertation or a thesis that is joyful, like that kind of discovery part. But I'm telling you, like, definitely not the works cited page. So, you know, there are tools, and a lot of you are probably using a tool like Zotero. That's the one I think that the library most often recommends, or at least the librarians that we work with. And, you know, Zotero will just kind of leach that bibliographic information from especially if it's an electronic article or electronic book that you're pulling from. So you don't even have to, you don't necessarily have to kind of type in manually, you know, author, publication, name, date, etc. Then there's something called the 3-2-1 backup rule. So this is the sort of, doesn't necessarily fit with the organizing your research heading. But so the 3-2-1 backup rule is that basically you should have 3 copies of your big files, right? So like 3 copies of your drafts in 2 different formats. So, you know, you might have a copy of, you know, whatever chapter that you happen to be working on your hard drive, a copy of the same content in the cloud. And then you might also have a copy of your stuff that you print out. Maybe you have a hard copy. So you always want to have backups, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know. So this is something that like actually only has to happen to you once, for in a big project, and then it doesn't happen again, right? So definitely 3-2-1 backup. And then you know, consider also using some project management software like Trello. And I'll show you what these look like. So here's Zotero. And this is just from their website. So you can see over here, let's see, I've never used this annotate tool before. Can I use it? No, it's not letting me. I can't use it. Okay, so you know, all the way to the left of your screen, all of your files, you can organize all of your articles into files. You can make a to-read list, things that you haven't read yet, but that you've definitely kind of cited. In the middle are all the articles themselves. And then all the way to the right of your screen, that's where that kind of citation information appears and the notes. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask you a question really quickly. So who's using Zotero? I mean, you can either do a thumbs up or you could just say yes in the chat. Megan and Heath. Megan and Heath. Are there other tools? Okay, EndNote, Mendeley, yep, same. And they do the same kinds of things. Oh, lots of Mendeley and some EndNote users. So that's interesting. So I think it just sort of varies. Sometimes people are like all over, some cohorts I should say, are like all over Zotero. And then others are like all over Mendeley or EndNote or something else. But yeah, so good. Definitely, those are excellent. And what about like project management tools? What about, you know, something like, I'll show you the Trello in case you don't know. A little latency. There we go. Okay, so this is Trello. This is something that I just do with paper and pen. But, you know, this can be a useful tool. People like it a lot also for collaboration. So where you have you know, in Trello, you can kind of set up a to-do, doing, and done list. Does anybody, and you can make it as detailed or kind of as basic as possible. This is that sort of front page that you might see for your project in Trello. So is anybody using any project management kind of software or a project management program like Trello? Doing that? Yeah, thumbs up. No. Nope. Okay, so Taylor, you're using Trello in your lab? Oh, somebody uses Excel? Excellent. Yep, for sure. So these tools, you know, and again, you know, it can be kind of a homegrown tool, but there are also other kinds of productivity tools. They can be really useful kind of as you're working through your project. Okay, let's go back to screen sharing. There we go. Okay, and so this is my last tip. And so the last tip is to reach out to others. And it doesn't matter at what point you reach out. Just reach out anytime you have a question or anytime you need help. So sometimes we see students at the writing studio who have been away for a really long time. You know, I mean, it could even be you know, 1 or 2 years that they haven't been working on their dissertation project, and they're anxious about contacting their advisors because they haven't been in touch. So we try really hard to encourage students to reach out, even if they're feeling like you know, they're anxious about it because of some exigent or otherwise circumstance. But you know, and sometimes we actually help people craft emails to advisors when there is that kind of level of anxiety. But so we always suggest that students, you know, anytime there's a question, and you know, like there are oftentimes that students ask us questions that we can't answer because maybe they're discipline specific, or maybe they're like department specific, like department procedure specific, or maybe they have something to do with the library and electronic dissertations and theses. You know, like we don't know that information necessarily. So so we always ask folks to talk to the people who have those answers, and those are often advisors. And when advisors don't, then they could be other members of the committee, other members of your committee, and those folks can always point you to the people who do have the right answers. We suggest that folks always consult department guidelines and policies, because those change, and sometimes they change from year to year. And, you know, like everybody gets emails and about stuff that's happening in the department, but people don't necessarily open those emails or read those emails because, you know, maybe you're working on something else. But, you know, some of that, some of the content that might be conveyed in some of those emails, or, you know, or broadcast maybe in other ways you might not have seen. And so be sure to consult department guidelines and policies, you know, at least once a year. Another way, and this is sort of like motivation. Another way to just kind of get motivation, or which is another kind of help, is to attend dissertation and thesis defenses, right? So you can see how other people are kind of presenting or conveying their research. You know, that might be in and of itself a kind of a motivation to get your own work done. You know, it's also another way that the process seems sort of like less scary, I think, because, you know, people are doing it, and it never seems as bad as you think it is when you see somebody else doing it. And then lastly, you can always seek out campus resources like the Writing Studio. You know, we have consultants who are also graduate students who help students all the time with dissertation and thesis writing. Okay, so, you know, I'm not sure that we necessarily have time to do this. I was going to put you in small groups, but I think that it might make more sense for me to move through the Q&A, and then you'll be able to have some time to do a survey that I'll share with you in just a second. Okay, so what kinds of questions do you all have for me? Okay, so, I'm seeing this, Darian. I want to hear tips and tricks to make home work friendly, because working from home due to COVID has been really rough. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Dan's suggestion is to set up a separate space dedicated to just schoolwork. Absolutely, yeah. So, and that's actually a kind of a workplace, working from home workplace productivity tip in general, is, you know, that the place where you spend leisure time, right, rest time, time for yourself, shouldn't be the same place where you do your work. So, you know, we don't all have the opportunity. We don't all have the opportunity to be in separate rooms, because you know, maybe you don't have a home office. That's a luxury. A lot of people don't. And so even if you move from, you know, one part of your apartment, even if it's an efficiency apartment, to another, that counts as a kind of dedicated workspace. So that's an excellent tip. That's an excellent suggestion. Oh yeah, great. And so Megan, you put a sign on your door saying you're working on a research project and don't bother you. Yeah, right, sure. Yeah. So Rudy, you're saying that your biggest issue today is that you're lacking motivation, for sure. Yeah, yep. So I think a lot of people get to that place, and I think that today motivation is especially hard. It's especially challenging, especially when things are kind of up in the air, and our lives are all really disrupted, and so we don't know how to operate. And so I think, you know, for me personally, and folks can, I hope that they'll chime in, you know, for me personally, it really helps to have somebody who I can reach out to. So I have colleagues when I'm working on a project, I can say to them, hey, I'm working on something, would you mind reading it for me? I actually don't want any feedback from you. I just want you to read it. And then that person serves as my kind of accountability buddy. Or, you know, I might be in a place where I might want them to read it. But getting somebody else, even if it's not like real accountability, but getting somebody else to hold me to some degree of accountability is really, really helpful. That gets a lot of that gets me motivated. What other suggestions do you have, like, for motivation? What do you guys do when you get stuck? How do you guys get yourselves kind of writing and working again? Yeah, take a break. Absolutely. Yeah, do something else. Do something completely, don't even worry about your project. Go for a walk, clear your mind. Do stretches, absolutely. Yeah, these are all really good suggestions. Color, clean your house. Clean your, yeah, yes. I think, like, in the end, it's okay. You know, this just sort of goes back to one of those earlier slides. Just don't beat yourself up over not being productive, right? Because that doesn't help. It just makes us feel worse. It doesn't motivate us, right? So, and sometimes we just need to be in that place, you know, where we just kind of need to sit and not and not do the thing, you know, and maybe do other things. But yeah, the trick is to kind of come back to, you know, what you're working on. So, you know, doing things like setting deadlines for yourself, or going back to your calendar, or even doing something like the Pomodoro technique, or, you know, writing for 15 minutes. There was we do a dissertation writing retreat, and there was a student who was in the retreat, and she's actually now a licensed therapist, but she was working on her PhD. And the advice that she gave the group then, and it's something that I still think of today, is that don't wait to be motivated. She said, action first, motivation will follow. Right? So action, motivation always follows action. So just get doing it. And you'll find that that you can get a lot more done than you had initially anticipated. Okay, so I've got 2 more slides. Okay, so if you did like the tips that I shared with you, then you can get more. You can get more. So from July 6th through the 9th, the Writing Studio is having an online dissertation writing retreat. Oh, I forgot to share this with you. Here it is up on my screen, but you can't see it. There we go. Okay. So we are holding a dissertation writing retreat, and we will drill down into some real specifics during the retreat itself. So we'll be talking a lot about some of the same things, but offering really specific and concrete strategies and sharing strategies. And we'll also be talking about pieces and parts of the dissertation itself. Like, we devote a day to the literature review, we devote a day to kind of researching and collecting and organizing information. And we devote a day to time management and those kinds of things. So if you're interested in the writing retreat, I recommend that you contact one of the co-facilitators, who's also a graduate student who's dissertating now. His name is Manzoor Alam, and you'll see his email address there, ma0092@mix.wvu.edu. So you can go ahead and email him. If you enjoyed, also if you enjoyed the retreat, we'd be happy to hear your feedback. Not the retreat. If you enjoyed this presentation, we'd be happy to hear your feedback. And if you have constructive feedback as well, you know, we'd love to hear from you. So we'd very much like for you to take a survey, and you can access the survey by taking a picture of the QR code or using your QR code reader, or going to this website, which is linked, but I don't know that you can access the link via presentation mode. Can you, Betty? I don't think you can you?
No, I think you can just put it in the chat.
Yeah, that's good. I'll do that. Okay.
Yeah. And we would really appreciate everyone to take this really short. It won't take you more than 2-3 minutes to complete. It always helps us to plan our next professional development activities. We want to do what is helpful to you. So, and you are the only ones who could tell us what to do. So please kindly complete the evaluation. That will really help us plan for the fall and the spring and maybe in the future summers.
Yeah, I'm sending the link. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you guys couldn't see the slides. See, I just thought, oh, things are going smoothly. I'm sure it's fine. I didn't even ask, I'm sorry. So the last couple of slides are gonna be, well, the last couple of slides had the email address of the, and I can write that down here.
I thought maybe the QR code may be faster. If they...
Can I cut and paste that here? Oh, you thought yeah, you know, yeah, it would have been faster if they could have seen the slides. I'm sorry, Betty.
Oh, no.
Not for sure. Oh, the QR code worked.
Yeah. So if you put it back on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that.
Yeah, I will.
Let me try it. I'll try it too. Put it back up. Yeah.
You want to do? Okay. I'll wait. I'll let you. Want to put it back up, Betty?
Yeah.
Or do you want me to put it back up?
The slide with the QR code. Let's see. I want to try it to see if I could get it too.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
1 second.
Okay. Let me see.
You see it?
Yes. You can access it that way. Yeah. Okay. While you're doing that, students, I apologize. I did announce that there are 2 more workshops in July, and I said in the beginning of this workshop that the information and the registration links will be on our website. And one student told me that the one for the CV resume writing was not, but I notified my GA and it's back up again. So that information is there now if you want to go and register for the July 9th workshop on CV and resume writing, and then the July 23rd workshop on grant writing.
All right, I've just got one more slide. So if you'd like to work with a tutor or graduate writing consultant, you're certainly welcome to. We have at least one graduate writing consultant working this summer. And to schedule an appointment, just visit speakwrite.wvu.edu/students. And that's it. It was great talking with you all.
Thank you very much, Nathalie, for doing this and for sharing very important information. And students, anytime if you need any help or have any feedback, please email me at bmei@mail.wvu.edu, or you can find me on our website, graduateeducation.wvu.edu. And after you complete the evaluation, you can sign off. And thank you again. Have a good afternoon, everyone.